Good afternoon, everybody. Uh, Very pleased to see you all here. I'm Mohammed Sohrabi, Senior Water Resource Control Engineer and Supervisor of Supply and Demand Assessment Unit. Um, if there is any need for an emergency exit, you can take the stairs, exit the building, and go across the street to Cesar Chavez Plaza. Restrooms are outside the room on your right. And today we have Eric Ekdahl here with us. He is our Deputy Director. We also have Erin Raghazi. She is our Assistant Deputy Director. We have Philip Dutton. He's our Section Manager. And today's presentation will take about 30 minutes. We'll take questions and comments. You can also submit questions, comments, feedbacks using emails. The presenters will talk about that. Today's presenters are Alisa Whitaker and Marshall Knox. With that, I let the presentation start.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Today, we are going to be introducing the Supply and Demand Assessment Program, which is a new program here at the Water Boards. And we'll be going over the selection of watersheds for a new modeling effort. Today's meeting is also webcast online. We'll be posting that recording to our webpage as well if you would like to go over that information again later or share it with anyone else. Okay, so the purpose of today's meeting is to provide you the information necessary to review our preliminary selection of watersheds. We're going to have an introduction to the Division of Water Rights and provide you some necessary background information on California water rights. We'll also dive into the division's drought response in the Russian River watershed and how that has led to the new water supply and demand assessment program. And then the second half of today's presentation is going to go through the actual watershed selection process, and we'll introduce a handful of pilot watersheds that we are already starting work on, as well as present our list of preliminary watersheds, and that's what we're hoping to receive feedback on, is that list. And then lastly, we will hold some time at the end of today's meeting for feedback, comments, and questions. For anyone tuning in online, you can email your questions to us. We have our email displayed here, dwr-sda@waterboards.ca.gov. Please feel free to submit your questions as you have them, and we'll read them out at the end of today's meeting. So we are within the State Water Resources Control Board, which is a part of the California Environmental Protection Agency, Cal EPA. And we are led by a 5-member board, as seen here. The board has public meetings that are held in person and offered online, virtually, for remote participation. Our program is within the State Water Board in the Division of Water Rights. The Division of Water Rights is the body that issues water right permits and licenses for surface water appropriations. The division does not administer water rights for groundwater extractions or certain surface water diversions that we'll discuss in a minute. And additionally, the division works to set in-stream flow requirements and help manage water during times of shortage. So what is a water right? A water right is a legal permission to use a reasonable amount of water for beneficial purposes. These may include domestic purposes, so think household uses, drinking water, outdoor purposes, but also irrigation, recreation, fish and wildlife protection, fire protection, and other beneficial uses. Water rights are considered to be usufructuary rights, which means that the water belongs to the state of California, so water right holders do not own the water, but they have a right to use it for beneficial use. There's several types of water rights, but the most common are riparian and appropriative, including both pre- and post-1914s. So I'll get into both of these in a bit more detail. First, we have riparian water rights. So if a property is adjacent to a water body, such as a river or stream, then the property has a riparian water right. Water can only be used on that parcel, not exported out of the watershed or transported elsewhere, or stored seasonally for times when there's less water available. Additionally, a riparian diversion only applies to natural flows. You cannot divert flows that are foreign or imported from elsewhere under a claim of a riparian water right. In terms of priority, riparian water rights follow what's called correlative sharing. So riparian right holders on a common source share a common priority and are required to reasonably share the available water. In general, riparian water rights are usually senior to appropriative water rights. So appropriative water rights are associated with both riparian and non-riparian land. These rights allow for water to be exported out of the parcels. They allow for seasonal storage and for diversion of all flows, both natural and foreign or imported water. They are based on the prior appropriation doctrine that states that water rights are determined by priority of beneficial use. So a common phrase you may have heard for this is first in time, first in right. Pre-1914s are the most senior appropriative water rights, and as the name suggests, these were established prior to December 1914 and before the current administrative process was established. While diversions under pre-1914 rights can often report under an initial statement of diversion and use, the division generally does not validate these claims. Post-1914 appropriative rights include permits, licenses, and registrations. These are obtained by applying for a permit through the State Water Board and are subject to specific conditions. So in order to document water diversion and use throughout the state, diverters are required to submit reports of their annual water use. These reports detail the amount of water that is directly diverted and stored and used monthly. Riparian and pre-1914s submit what are called statements of diversion and use, while post-1914s submit water diversion and use reports. Water right reporting is very helpful. It protects water rights based on their priority year. It informs both statewide and local water availability and planning decisions and assists in processing water right applications. This process is based on self-reported data, and oftentimes these reports may contain errors associated with missing or duplicate reporting, issues with unit conversion issues, or multiple owners. And so this leads to cases where the reported demand that we have in our database may not actually reflect the actual demand in a system. So in order to format this into a robust, usable data set, the division staff have to go through and QA/QC this data. And this is a very time-consuming task, but it's critical in order to better represent the watershed. That being said, it is important that water right holders report their diversion amount in both a correct format and unit. Once that final data set is cleaned, then we can use it to represent the water demand within a watershed. So moving on to the Russian River drought response. Back in 2021, in response to drought conditions in Sonoma and Mendocino counties and a drought emergency proclamation from Governor Newsom, the board adopted emergency regulations to protect the unreasonable use of water and to require curtailments when water was not available under a diverter's priority of right. These regulations were intended to protect the threatened water supplies. So to do this, the division also took curtailment actions, which involved issuing curtailments to water right holders. The division used a water availability analysis that we'll get into a bit more in the next slide that incorporated both forecast models and water right priority. Due to the impact of the curtailments, the division also began working with stakeholder groups to find alternative solutions. This led to the development of the Voluntary Water Sharing Program. This program was a collaborative effort between the Division of Water Rights and a diverse group of stakeholders, including municipalities, water agencies, tribes, and agriculture. It provided an innovative mechanism where senior right holders could voluntarily forbear or forego diverting a portion of their water allocation in order to benefit junior water right holders that might have otherwise had a limited supply due to the curtailments. So the curtailment analysis done in the Russian River watershed required 3 areas of work. We have water supply data, water demand data, and water allocation optimizations. So as you can see here in this photo, we divided the subwatershed into 28 subbasins, which allowed for water allocation to be made at a much finer subwatershed scale. How does the analysis work? Well, the division first used observed and forecasted meteorological data to represent the water supply in a watershed. And then, as I mentioned, we have that water demand data from our self-reported water use reports, and that is used to represent the demand in the watershed. Then we use a water allocation tool to assess the available water at a sub-watershed level and allocate the water based on the supply and demand data and water right priority. In 2022, the board established the Supply and Demand Assessment Program to develop water supply models and demand assessments for new watersheds using an approach similar to what we did in the Russian River. The goal of this program is to provide data and tools to inform better planning and decision-making during times of water shortage. To achieve this, we receive funding and are currently contracting with Paradigm Environmental to develop the water supply or hydrologic models to assess water availability in select watersheds. We will be continuing on the work that was done in the Russian River watershed to continue to expand these models and tools. Included here is an example of a data visualization tool, which is available on our webpage. It's an interactive tool that allows you to look at both past and projected water demands over time. All tools developed through this program will be publicly available and accessible online. We're hoping that these tools will be something that can be used for both local as well as board efforts. They can help identify areas of risk for drought planning and will provide water users with more info on their watershed, which could also lend towards opportunities for local solutions and actions. We plan to continue these water availability estimates and will extend this to other watersheds throughout California as well. Future applications of these data and tools include opportunities to evaluate flow scenarios, assess water availability in times of water shortage, and the potential application of predicting how watersheds may react to future climate scenarios. All right, and then the second half of the presentation is going to go into a bit more on our watershed selection process, as well as the watersheds that we will be considering.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marshall Knox. I'll talk about our watersheds and our watershed selection process. So to determine the priorities that we use to select for each watershed, we emphasize watersheds that are driven by surface water demand. These areas were emphasized because of the division's ability to apply the water rights priority system and because they may provide more benefit if potential curtailments were to occur due to that priority system. So another area of emphasis that we used for our prioritization process was areas that contain salmonid habitat or other important fisheries, especially where areas where water quantity concerns might be impacting those fisheries. We are specifically looking at watersheds in the North Coast, San Francisco Bay, and Central Coast regions. However, this is not a formal requirement, and we will be considering watersheds outside of those areas where appropriate. Additionally, we don't want to duplicate any existing work where the Division of Water Rights is not already engaged in, where they're not already engaged in other drought or flow assessment work. A caveat to this is areas where modeling at a sub-watershed level might accelerate or complement work being done in those regions or watersheds. The 3 pilot watersheds that we have selected and where work is underway are the Navarro River on the north coast, the Napa River in the San Francisco Bay, and Butte Creek in the Central Valley. These have already been assigned to Paradigm Environmental, our contractor, and the development of study plans and work on the water supply models is already in progress. Each pilot watershed has different characteristics that will help inform the selection of additional watersheds and model construction for any other watershed that we might select. So our first pilot watershed, the Navarro River. The Navarro River watershed is characterized by many small diversions for agricultural, commercial, and residential use. Additionally, there are issues in this area with the degradation of habitats for coho salmon and steelhead trout. Paradigm Environmental has completed the work plan for this watershed. It has been reviewed and approved by staff, and currently they are building the water supply model and have divided up the watershed into smaller subbasins for use in the model and allocation tool. Supply and demand unit staff are currently working to finalize the demand data set of diversions in the watershed by completing quality control checks of the demand data for the Navarro. For the Napa River, this watershed is characterized by significant surface water groundwater interactions. In addition to a large amount of groundwater pumping in the area, there is heavy agricultural use, specifically for irrigation and frost protection. Throughout different times of year, the Napa River experiences critical low flow issues. There is an existing model for the entire San Francisco Bay region, developed by the San Francisco Estuary Institute, which is being used by the contractor to assist in model development. Supply and demand staff are currently reviewing the draft work plan submitted by the contractor, and currently Paradigm is adjusting the existing SFEI model to meet specific needs of this program, including individual watershed scale considerations and to further capture low flow conditions. Staff are also finalizing the demand data set for this watershed using quality control checks. For our Butte Creek watershed, that is characterized by having complex diversions in the valley regions and imported water from the Feather River for use for hydroelectric power by PG&E. There is little diversion information available outside of the upper reaches of the watershed, and modeling this area and gaining a greater understanding of how much and where water is going will better inform planning and decision-making during times of water shortage. Watershed is also a critical habitat for the largest population of Central Valley spring run Chinook salmon, which is listed under both state and federal Endangered Species Act in 1999. And locally, stakeholders have well-established ongoing efforts to collaboratively improve fishery conditions. Supply and demand staff are also currently reviewing the draft work plan submitted by the contractor, as well as finalizing the demand data set for this watershed. For our considerations for additional watersheds that we might select, to evaluate additional watersheds for inclusion in these efforts, we used a criteria-based approach using relevant and available data to evaluate each watershed. The criteria are as follows: water right consideration, hydrologic complexity, ecological significance, and land designation. So using the criteria within each of these categories, our staff developed a preliminary watershed tier by grouping watersheds based on their appropriateness for these modeling efforts. After initial tier development, updates and further iterations were made according to previously received feedback. So the preliminary selection of watersheds presented today reflects staff's considerations of the preliminary tiers, This meeting and the comments we receive are part of this iterative evaluation and will inform the final selection of watersheds. This slide shows a map of the currently proposed preliminary watershed selections. The pilot watersheds, Navarro, Napa, and Butte, as well as the Russian River, which we are continuing to work on, is shown in blue. Watersheds where existing modeling efforts are shown in red, and they were excluded from consideration today. They include the Scott River, the Shasta River, Redwood Creek, Eel River, and the Ventura River. Other watersheds that we have evaluated but were not under the preliminary selections are shown in gray. And watersheds in white were not included in the evaluation process either due to known existing efforts or because they were outside of the scope of this effort. The 7 watersheds shown in green are our preliminary watershed selections. Each of these watersheds received high scores in our watershed evaluation process. Each has characterizations that make them a suitable choice for modeling efforts, and some receive specific requests for prioritization from either the regional boards or CDFW. So, these 7 watersheds are the Tamales-Drakes Bay, the Mattole River, the Gualala River, the Salmon Creek, South Fork Trinity, Carmel River, and Upper Puda. I won't go into all of them, but for 2 of the watersheds, here are a few details about them. The Tamales-Drakes Bay is located in the San Francisco Bay region. It received high scores for ecological criteria. It also contains the Lagunitas Creek and Walker Creek. Those are sub-watersheds that were nominated by the SF Bay Regional Board and CDFW due to critical dry conditions within the streams. And the South Fork Trinity, it is located in the North Coast region. It received high scores for water demand. It also contains the Upper and Lower Hayfork Creeks, which were nominated by the North Coast Regional Boards as 2 important sub-watersheds due to their high water demand and critical dry conditions as well. And with that, I will pass it back to Alyssa. Thank you.
All right, so that wraps up our presentation. For further information, please feel free to visit our webpage. We have an informational fact sheet posted there. We'll also be posting a recording of this meeting and the slides if you'd like to review those further. Lastly, on our website, you can also find a link to our email subscription list to stay up to date on all of our activities and program developments. As we close, I would like to note the board's current effort to improve our data processes known as Upward, Updating Water Rights Data for California. In 2021, the board initiated the Upward project to advance the board's ability to collect, manage, and provide water right data to the public. Upward plans to create a modern electronic content management system that will streamline water rights online reporting and will improve access to water right records. Currently, the program is in its software development phase with plans to have an initial demonstration available by the end of the year. So if you'd like more information on that, please visit the Upward webpage or contact our team by email. I also want to highlight a related telemetry project. The division has contracted with the California Water Data Consortium for a research project to pilot the automated measurement and reporting of water diversion data. A pilot telemetry project is kicking off in the Russian River, and they are currently looking for volunteers. So if you're interested, please feel free to visit the consortium's webpage or contact their team directly. So we're now going to move on to our comments and feedback. To guide your questions, we do ask you to consider the following: whether there are specific criteria or data sets that we should have used, if there's any other watersheds you believe should be considered or prioritized, and lastly, whether you know of any existing data and information that would help with successful development of these tools. I'd like to reiterate that the watersheds presented today are very much preliminary. They are not our final selections, and with that in mind, we are eager to hear feedback on those choices. We'll start with questions from our in-person attendees, and then we'll move on to those tuning in online. So if you are online, please submit questions to our email. Again, that's dwr-sda@waterboards.ca.gov, and we will read them out and answer them here. I also want to note that we'll be accepting written comments on this selection of watersheds until noon on June 17th. So please feel free to submit those if you'd like to share or review this information further and then come back to us with your feedback. That would be very helpful.